go through some of the specifics and give you some timelines. And through giving this presentation, versions of it anyway, to various associations and groups in the past several weeks, I've been encouraged to kind of front load a lot of the information. So you're going to find pretty much everything you want to know on the first slide. But I will endeavor to go through it rather quickly, and hopefully we'll have a lot of time for questions for me to respond to the best of my ability. Okay. Oh, that's not good. There we go. Okay, so as I just mentioned, I'm going to go through a quick summary of what the federal energy efficiency regulation for manufactured fenestration products would look like. So these are some of the key takeaways, and I want to get these out of the way right up front. So what we're looking at right now is we're looking at putting requiring a mandatory label and information reporting for the products that are covered under the regulation. And this will apply to products manufactured beginning in 2028. So our intention is to kind of leave as much runway as possible and give everybody an opportunity to familiarize themselves with the process, and for us to get information from you and from anybody else involved in the industry that can help us shape the final version of the regulation so that it suits everybody. I want to highlight that there are going to be no minimum performance requirements that we're considering for this amendment. The regulation itself would, again, involve mostly information gathering and database building to support future program policies and goals. And we feel that at this time, there's enough and diverse minimum energy performance requirements for products, whether they be through building codes, through provincial regulations, or through municipal bylaws. We're looking to harmonize these reporting requirements, and especially the labeling requirements, with those that exist already for products covered under the scope. And I'm talking about labels that are put out by the NFRC and the Energy Star Canada. When I speak of Energy Star, it says a few times here in the slides, I mean Energy Star Canada. I can't speak to the program administered by the EPA, only the one that we have from the Office of Energy Efficiency. Okay. Did I press the wrong button? There we go. So just a quick overview of the Energy Efficiency Act. I'm just going to put this out there because of what we're talking about now is we're talking to a group of new stakeholders, at least from a federal perspective, that have products that are not covered, that are not currently under the Energy Efficiency Act. So the ideal of the Energy Efficiency Act is to cover energy using products. And the definition of an energy using product does in fact extend to those that affect or control the usage of energy. So we're talking about other products, thermostats, windows, doors, skylights, which will directly contribute to the energy efficiency and the energy use of home conditioning equipment. We're talking about residential focus here. There's other things that we're putting through in current and future amendments, including water using products, which also affect the energy efficiency and energy use of equipment in a home. So the Act itself provides us with the authority to collect data, and we want to collect this data to better develop evidence-based programs and policies. So without this data that we have out there, without a federally regulated database of products, we're kind of operating in the dark, and we're operating at the whims of various market studies and special interest groups. We really want to know what the efficiency of products are out there right now, where they would be, where they would fall in an efficiency spectrum compared to other products, and just what the best policy drivers would be to increase the energy efficiency and contribute to some of our overall climate goals for the country. So the Act itself provides for the authority, and in fact, it actually mandates and requires that we enforce any regulation that we put into place. So this is something that I want to highlight now and in future slides, is that we do have a duty and a mandate to enforce these regulations. So products that would be regulated would be subject to compliance. And we don't mean this to seem like a scary thing. This is actually, we hope, working alongside with you, this can be a good thing to regulate the industry and make a level playing field for all participants. We've had comments in the past from provinces and other program and policy bodies, that there's no oversight, there's no actual authority to mandate and to follow up on any complaints. And this is something that a federal regulation for energy efficiency is capable of doing. I'd like to make a kind of an important point here about the actual jurisdictional boundaries of what a federal regulation will cover. So a federal regulation will cover products that are manufactured and shipped between provinces or imported into the country. So this is an important point that we wish to highlight, because we know there's so many manufacturers that operate on a regional level. They may only produce and distribute their products within their own province. And in those cases, the extent of the federal regulation would not apply to those products or markets. However, there are provincial regulations in place in some provinces, and you would still be subject to whichever provincial regulations or municipal bylaws are in effect. So to speak to the policy context, the reasons why we're putting this in place, and this has been kind of in the works for about at least 5 years. We had some slowdowns due to different priorities that happened during the pandemic, but we wish to re-engage with everybody and reaffirm our commitment to the energy efficiency goals that have been set out for 2030 and for 2050. And we see that building envelope efficiency is a huge part of that, and we want to support and understand the industry contributing to that as much as possible. So again, I'll highlight products that are federally regulated are subject to compliance enforcement, and we do have greater mandate and resources than the provinces may have, or municipal bylaws may have, in terms of enforcing these. So if we find products that are undercutting the market, products that are coming in under the radar that are perhaps mislabeling or misleading their performance, we do have an apparatus in place to deal with that. So we wish to support the industry and the players that are playing by the rules, that are making really efficient products that are available, to provide consumers with the best products that are available. Again, level playing field, and we're looking for testing and labeling requirements. A key driver for this for us is that we wish to extend and get insight into the retrofit market, because building codes are already in place, and building codes generally only cover new construction or major renovations or additions. So certain things like windows and doors that come in, replacements, may not be subject to any of those building code requirements. And they wouldn't have to report the data, and the products that can go into there may not necessarily meet minimum performance requirements that are required by building codes. The information label, we feel that it's producing a standardized information label that is applicable to all provinces and territories in Canada. It can support local codes, programs, and regulations. And in time, everybody will be looking for this label. It'll be a mandatory thing that people are expecting. And the label itself will direct them to a federal regulatory database of compliant products. So energy advisors, code authorities, programs can all refer to this information that's available, and they can check up on the products to make sure that they're meeting the federal regulations. So quickly, I think we're all familiar with a lot of this. A lot of the definitions here come from both the National Building Code and exist in some provincial regulations. So the scope of products that we're looking at right now, we're considering what we're calling manufactured fenestration products. So these are for small and light commercials. We're talking residential occupancy, less than 3 stories, anything that's covered in Part 9 of the Canada Building Code. We're not going to be examining any kind of commercial products. There'll be no curtain walls or storefront windows that are going to be included. Within the scope, it'll contain products that are already covered under the scope of some regulations in provinces, and also of the Voluntary Energy Star program. So windows, sliding glass doors, hinged and bifold doors, and skylights, tubular daylighting devices. So what I wish to highlight this, and I think it's kind of boxed out a couple times throughout this presentation, is that, we are not introducing any minimum performance requirements. So again, there's a lot of these that are out there, and they're best dealt, in our opinion, on a local and regional level, where specific provinces or municipalities are able to set performance requirements based upon their program goals and the specific market and policies that they have in place. Our intent is to have the regulation provide for a standardized label, which would be referred to by these provinces, programs, and bylaws, that they would require this, and the information would be available to everybody. And again, the information we're talking about is in thermal performance values. Testing standards where we would gain these. This should be familiar to everybody in terms of thermal performance testing. We're going to accept A440.2, NFRC 100 and 200. So we want to capture as much of the products that are out there. And I wish to emphasize that we're not requiring any additional testing beyond what is already being performed for these products. We're just requiring that this information be reported. Labeling. So this is a big question and a big concern of a lot of people, and that we've had some feedback on. So we really want to engage with you and come up with the best solution possible. We don't want to produce multiple labels with the same information, but we are going to regulate that each individual model will have an information label in a form prescribed by NRCan in the regulation. So we have some flexibility with this, but at the same time, there are existing templates used by the NFRC and Energy Star programs. So we need to follow along very closely with those. So the actual label that we will be requesting will be very similar to the ones that you're already familiar with in printing. This standardized label will eventually replace the Energy Star Canada label. It will be able to serve both the regulatory database and the Energy Star program. And we are in consultations, active consultations with the NFRC about what their requirements are as well. So the last thing we want is to require multiple labels of redundant information. Again, the efficiency is actually part of the name of our office. So we don't see that there's any use in wasting paper or ink or time or money to get the same information that's already there. The information that we would require, we're breaking it up into two fields. So there would be mandatory information and optional information that could be added to the label based upon the discretion of the manufacturer. So the mandatory information is undoubtedly there would be product identification information that we're looking for. We're looking to harmonize in model identification codes, because this is an issue that's been brought to our attention. And again, we don't want people to have to keep track of multiple model codes. So we're working to actively harmonize with the NFRC and their requirements wherever possible. The date of manufacture is something that I'd like to point out. That's important to us for determining when products enter into the regulatory database, when they're covered. And in terms of the actual thermal performance values, we're talking about the ones that we know in factor, solar heat gain coefficient, and VT. So you'll see over here highlighted on optional information, especially here at the top, is the ER value. We're not requiring the ER value as a mandatory bit of information. Again, this is so we can harmonize with as many of the provinces and programs as possible. But we do fully understand and accept that the ER is a valid compliance pathway for code compliance and for other programs. So that can be calculated and displayed at the discretion of the manufacturer. There will be a place for it, but it's not something that we are making mandatory, and it's not something that we will be verifying. The optional information to go in here, again, if this label is going to serve multiple programs with the same information, again, there needs to be a section on it for program participation and certification for the badges and logos of whichever programs that your products may be affiliated with. And we're exploring possibilities to direct the reader to secondary sources. So again, this model code and this information that we have will direct you to a certified product database where the information can be looked up by anybody, by code advisors or energy advisors, code compliance officials, or consumers when they're looking to shop around for their products. The verification and reporting. So this is something that will differ a little bit from existing programs like the Energy Star. Products will carry an energy efficiency certification mark. This is a requirement of all regulated products under the Efficiency Act. And that just means that we need a mark of the CV that's tested it. So the CVs that we will be accepting will be accredited by either the SCC or the NFRC. So that should cover just about all the things that are out there. And we're actively working with any of the CAs submitting CSA data, testing the CSA standard to get data from them. The energy efficiency report is something that we would require, and this would be the information. It's usually like a spreadsheet that will have the required fields and information so that we can add this to our database. Due to the fact that we're talking about fenestration products and there are millions of models out there, this is going to be a challenge for us and it's going to be a challenge for everybody. So we're looking to harmonize the requirements and work actively with organizations such as the NFRC to obtain data directly from them. It is our preferred option to get data from the CBs or from the NFRC or CSA where it's collected to minimize the burden both on reporting from manufacturers and from everybody else, and also on ourselves so that we know that the data that we're getting is coming in. So please we would like and welcome your comments on any of these details as we work them out, and let us know what would work and if you have any great ideas or what can we all use. One thing I'd like to highlight at the bottom is that only one report per model is required for inclusion in the database. So again, we only need the thermal efficiency values per model basis. So once it's in there, we're not collecting any shipment data. It's not of any interest to us about where these products are, or where they're like how many models are moving around. Once it's included in the database, that model could be looked up if you see it in a store, in a showroom, or a dealer. So anybody could look on that label, look it up in our database, and know that it's accepted and it's covered under the regulations. So the timelines that I'll go over in the next couple slides here. Again, the way that the energy efficiency regulations work is that the amendments can go into place based upon a kind of haphazard timeline that's kind of out of our control. Again, it goes through many levels of government all the way up to cabinet before it's approved. So the way that we can provide certainty to stakeholders is by specifying in the text of the regulation the date of manufacture of when products are going to be covered. So regardless of when the actual regulation is published and comes into force, we can put a specific date in there. So the date that we're looking at right now is January 1st, 2028. And we're going to work alongside with the Energy Star Canada program to use Energy Star participants, which I appreciate is a large segment of the market, to submit their data early. It could be a program requirement of the Energy Star program to have this regulated label. And in fact, since this regulated label will be replacing the Energy Star label, it makes perfect sense to use the Energy Star products as kind of a testing ground for early compliance before the mandatory compliance period for all products comes into place. So this is a bit of a timeline that I want to show you here about the long cycle of how things take place. This is kind of a condensed version. I've taken out some of the internal mechanisms and workings that we have where it goes through various levels of government all the way up to the cabinet and then back down to our department and through lawyers and all the way back again. But we're right here at the top in the pre-consultation phase. And so in April, we updated our forward regulatory plan on the NRCan website. So this gives an insight into the industry about which products are going to be changing or which products are going to be modified in terms of the next amendment. Then we produce technical bulletins and webinars. So the technical bulletin has been prepared. It has been released in a temporary form. And I've actually heard this morning from our office that it should be released either this week or next week officially on the website. And that will contain details of our proposal, much of which I've given you here, but in a bit more of a standardized format that we use for all products. It's also a requirement of an amendment to the energy efficiency regulations to produce a webinar. So we're going to be producing a webinar on June 19th, which is available to the public. Anybody can attend. There'll be 2 sessions in English and in French as well. And we would invite all of you to register for it, and please come and participate and hear the information we have, and submit any comments or questions in this pre-consultation phase by at latest September 13th. So after this, we move into the consultation phase, and we get to pre-publication in the Canada Gazette, Part 1. If you're not familiar with the Canada Gazette, it's kind of our official regulatory record that goes out there. It would be equivalent to something that DOE would use in the Federal Register. So the pre-publication will give the details of what the actual regulation will look like, and then there's an official 70-day comment period after that. And then it goes through another yearly cycle, and the final regulation is published in Canada Gazette Part 2, and then it will come into force. So as I said, coming into force of the regulation is only one aspect of it, that we can actually write in the text of the regulation when products will actually be required to submit this information based upon their date of manufacture. So 2027, we're proposing an early compliance period with the Energy Star products, and mandatory compliance in 2028. So the next steps, the webinars here, when these slides are shared with all of you, these are clickable links that'll take you to the registration page, and you can download a copy of the technical bulletin directly from the registration page. And comments we request by September 13th to keep our timelines in order. And again, this is a pre-consultation phase, and we really are getting out there early and often. We want to hear from everybody involved about what their thoughts are to help us craft the best product and the best regulation we can. So if you'd like to reach out to us, we can set up meetings, we can explain in detail. If you have specific questions, you can take it to your industry associations, or you can contact us if necessary. Perhaps against my better judgment, I provided my personal email address there. You can contact me. I'm going to be working on this file for a while. If you don't like what I have to say, you can jump the queue and go to my manager, who's listed next. I think he'll give you more or less the same response. And if you have any Energy Star related questions, because again, I don't speak for the Energy Star program. I work with them very closely, but Jude Louis is the Energy Star account manager. All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, let's be civil.
All right.
Let's be civil. We'll give just a little bit of, let's be civil. Often we get this kind of information pushed down to us without any discussion, without any consultation. 3 years we've got. 27, right? Adam, that's what you said?
28.
28 for the final. So here's your opportunity. Robert, go ahead.
Yes, hi Adam. Robert Jutra with UL
Hi, Robert.
and chair of the whole 8440 group for Windows. I'll speak on the lab side. Some slides you were showing certification body responsible for testing. I guess that's all encompassing the process where the labs are not certification bodies, but the labs are responsible for testing or simulation. Then it goes to a certification body that basically responsible for verifying the results from the labs. Is that still the process? Because I think that it was a bit simplified in the process.
Yeah.
So it's still the process, right? Because the way it works as we speak is labs are not certification body. On another slide, there was certification body approved by CSA and NFRC, which my understanding, you're talking about the lab or the simulation at this stage, because CSA does not approve except their own certification body.
Yes.
But they don't approve certification body. SCC does.
Yeah. I believe it was SCC that was mentioned.
No, well, there's one
Okay.
slide that it was talking about
Okay.
CSA and NFRC. So I just want to make sure that people understand that the process in achieving the results will stay the same, where you deal with a lab or a simulation lab, then you get a report. That report from the lab gets sent directly to a certification body that verifies the results, and then it gets to you. So the report to you comes from the certification body. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah. No,
And it's verification of the results from a test lab report, right?
no, you're correct. It would come
Okay.
from the certification body itself. Like I do understand a lot of the simulation work gets put out to other
Yeah.
labs and specifics, and it comes to the certification body.
Okay,
If it
so-
wasn't clear on the slides, I apologize. But yeah, the certification body would have to be certified or accredited by the SCC or the NFRC.
Yeah, okay. So I understand because I know I'm gonna get questioned about that. So I just want to make sure that I understood the process, which is not different from the process that people are going through right now to be NFRC certified.
No, exactly. We're actively working with the NFRC to try and harmonize our process with theirs and share that data. Because again, if your products are already tested to meet code compliance or the Energy Star program and they're part of the NFRC database, then there's no reason to test again. We certainly don't want to require additional cost or expenses. So that's something that we're actively working towards to try and, if we can receive that data in the background and there's like minimal impact to the actual manufacturers, that would be fantastic. But again, please let us know. There's only thing I can only tell you about problems that we've thought of. I want to hear about other problems or roadblocks that are coming up that we're not aware of.
Adam, Mike Bruno, president of Everlast Group of Companies, past president for NRCan. Thanks for showing up. We're going to have some fun. I'm not going to be technical, but we're going to have some fun. So one of the points you brought up earlier is about the enforcement and policing for January 1st, 2028. Is there currently a program in place for that right now?
All federally regulated products under the Energy Efficiency Act are subject to compliance enforcement.
Okay, so
We do have a compliance enforcement team. Fenestration products are not currently regulated, but all other products,
well,
there's a team out there.
but you're here for fenestration, like
Yes.
fenestration products.
Mhm.
So I don't want to talk about other products.
Mhm.
I want to talk about fenestration products. That's the problem. And when it's because I found out yesterday that the municipalities are the ones that actually do the policing when it comes to products, right?
Okay.
Is that the case or not the case?
Well, when you're talking about the policing,
Yeah.
what we're talking about is we're requiring a mandatory information label. So that label, if there's example there that a municipality, an inspector from there finds something that's non-compliant, finds something that's missing information.
Adam,
Yes.
I'll just save you from going
Okay.
too far. The enforcement is not done for the Energy Efficiency Act on the federal level, is not done by the municipalities or building officials or anybody in that realm. It's done by your organization,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So products that are being imported in or non-compliant products, how do we protect our manufacturers from that? Where do we go? Do we have to wait 3 years? Because if we have to wait 3 years, if there's 50 manufacturers in this room, there'll probably be 20 left. And I've spoken to some of the members that sit on the NRCan committee, one's an MP as well. I went to go and visit them. They have no answer on how we're dealing with import products, not from protectionism, but more from complying to the National Building Code. What it seems like is we're continuously trying to push the envelope to get better, better, better at the expense of manufacturers, Canadian manufacturers. What is the government's or what is NRCan's position on that? And I'm not talking from a protectionism standpoint, but how are you or how is NRCan going to help the manufacturers in Canada, which are the livelihood of everyone here in Canada, continue to be able to operate? Because we're finding with more regulations and more testing and more labeling that we're actually the gap between our cost to get product into the market and that's not compliant is just getting bigger. And truthfully, it sounds to me that what you're doing today is just going to make it more expensive for our manufacturers in Canada to compete. And I don't think that federally or provincially or municipality, there's any accountability on the government side. I don't see how this is showing accountability on the government side. Because I've sat down with building code with building planners, head of building planners, and basically what they've told us, if there's non-compliant product in a home for windows and doors, we're not going to ask them to remove it. I'm from Ontario. That's one of my bases is in Ontario, and it's completely different across the country. We're not going to have that builder remove the product out of the home and we can't do it. And they said it's not their responsibility. So I'm a little bit concerned and have been concerned for a long time that all the federal government does is puts an NRCan and national building codes is put in more requirements, and imported products would fall under federally regulated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was told that the Canadian Border Services should be the one that's policing the windows and doors coming into the country. But I think it's more important for the Canadian Border Services to worry about human trafficking and drugs coming in and cars being stolen than windows that don't comply. So, that's just my point on that. And I'd like to get some feedback on how your stance or NRCan stance is going to help protect Canadian manufacturers.
Okay, well, thanks very much for your comments and your opinion. It's something that we've heard before, talking about this as well. So when I say that when a product is part of the energy efficiency regulations, we do have a mandate to enforce that compliance. When we're talking about the compliance that's there is products that are coming into the country or transmitted across borders. So if it's there, we do have a compliance apparatus. We have a compliance team in place. And the fact that we're talking about a standardized label that will be the same across the country for all products, that there's a lot more eyes on this product. There's a lot more people searching our database and looking for information on this. So if you have a non-compliant product that's coming in either from overseas or produced here domestically, there will be people who can signal that out and they can contact us and we will have resources to deal with it. And the resources that we have at the federal level, that we have at the federal level will be greater than what's available at the provincial level or at the municipal level or in terms of code compliance, because this is a comments that I've heard again and again is that the codes are there, but there's nobody there to enforce them. What happens when these products are put in and we know that they're not meeting it, we just kind of get pushed off. So that's something that I can say that we're looking at. And in terms of product regulation and in terms of actually figuring out and having the apparatus to put it there, there's not really much more that we can do than put a federal regulation in. It's the greatest extent that we can do for products. And you bring up the point about Canadian Border Services, about the products coming in. When the products come in, if they're coming in from overseas or from the United States, they have to submit an import report, which goes to Border Services, and they have to submit an energy efficiency report. So these reports have to be submitted before the product either crosses a provincial boundary or comes into the country. So the idea is that to make sure that all the products that are on the market are meeting the requirements that we have. So our goal is to put something across the country in terms of a label that will support the local and smaller players in the provinces and the municipalities who may not have the resources to follow up on some of these things. But thank you for your point. It's something that we really would like to discuss in detail again, and I'd love to talk to you about this later.
Adam, Jeff Baker with West Lab. I had a long list of questions. I'm trying to pare it down to 3. One for real quick clarification. One of your slides said that you will not be looking for shipment data. Is that correct?
I don't know that said that on the slide, but that's something that I said in terms of shipment data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. You said it. I don't think it was on the slide. So NRCan will not be requiring manufacturers to submit shipment data. Is that correct?
What we're looking at is we're looking at model efficiency data, because that once a model, if energy efficiency report per model is submitted to us, it stays in our database. We do not need to know how many of these models are coming in or where they're being produced or being shipped. That's something that, we're not interested in that kind of industry market. Well, I should rephrase that. We are interested in, but it's not covered under the regulations. Those are things we would look at.
Okay. That's real important.
Energy Star is doing that now, though. In the new participant agreement, you have to submit shipment data for Energy Star.
Yes, that is correct.
Just want to make sure we don't miss that point.
Yep. Good point, Terry. Will that change in the future?
For the
Shipment
shipment
data?
data, the energy efficiency regulations do not cover shipment data. Again,
Okay.
we just look at the efficiency of per model data. Shipment data is useful to us when we are making evidence-based policies or programs. But again, we don't get it from the regulatory database. We get to know which models are out there, but the actual terms of where those models and the actual numbers of where they're going is not covered.
Okay.
Our mandate.
This is the key and important question I've got, I think, and I'll limit myself to this one. An NFRC label or a CSA standard program label will not be sufficient to comply. Is that correct? That you will have a standardized label that is in addition to an NFRC label?
Well, that's a very good point to bring up. And
I know it
it's
is.
something that that's a touchy subject. So again, we can't accept just a CSA or just an NRC label. It has to be a federally regulated label that we have. But that being said, we are working with CSA and NFRC to harmonize the labeling requirements that will be in place. So ideally, we don't see any point in having multiple labels there with the same information that's out there. It doesn't make sense for us in terms of receiving the information, and it doesn't make sense in terms of ink and paper used to print these off. So if we can harmonize these together, that products coming into Canada or shipped across provincial borders can have a one harmonized label, that would be what we're working towards.
As somebody that's been part of NFRC since its very beginning, and I'm still on their board of directors, and you're aware of some of this already, they're going to be very touchy about their label. And I'm sure you're already aware of this. Like the Energy Star program right now adds sort of an add-on above the label.
Mhm.
Is that something you would be willing to consider to allow manufacturers to add on their compliance to this regulation as part of their already their certification label they're already using?
Again, that would, if we're adding it on, I mean, are we talking about two labels stuck together? Or are we talking about one label with an additional field? So these
One
these
label
are-
with maybe a box above it with your
Mhm.
requirements above their label. That's what Energy Star does right now.
Yeah, we're able to kind of work with the Energy Star program and deal with what their requirements are and harmonize our federally regulated label with the Energy Star label. And we're working to do that with the NFRC. We're exploring the options, and we've got a lot of runway here, and we're looking for input from everybody about what the best way to go about doing this is. So again, to put it out there, if we can have one label to rule them all, that's what we want. We don't want anything. We'd
Okay.
like to have something
Okay.
across the board that everybody's looking for.
I got one,
One more, Jeff.
Well, and I'll stop with one more, Terry. And this one's also quite important. Under the NFRC program, there is a certified certification number for each model.
Mhm.
Okay, in the program, has to be on their label, but it makes it traceable. Even to the point where if you have that number, you can go to the NFRC website and check a label on their website and verify the label. The Canadian certification programs have nothing like that I'm aware of in any of them right now. But the Standards Council of Canada that certifies those certification or accredits those certification bodies has no requirement in their programs for anything like that. You're the only one with a big stick that could require something of that nature. And it's absolutely vital for traceability of the label, to prove, the certification body is the one that's saying this data is valid. Traceability back to a database or something is quite vital here. And I'm hoping NRCan will take the big stick to at least level the playing field between NFRC and CSA labeling.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, this is really important, so I want to make sure we get to everybody. Yeah, absolutely. Adrian, be prepared to cut your presentation short because we're going to run a bit long, I think.
Dave Goldsmith from Cornerstone. I just have a comment. So your NRCan database will need to be brought up to speed. I think I hear a lot of complaints from the lady who sits next to me, who administrates all of this in our company. When people go to get their rebates, and something happened, there was a recertification, and your CPD number changed, and they can't find it in the NRCan database. And then the other complaint is you recertify, you get in the NFRC database, and then it doesn't make it into the NRCan database for like 6 months. So just a comment, like in an enforcement environment, it's going to be critical for that to be updated on a regular basis, potentially even daily, or if not like live, connected to NFRC or other certifiers database. So that's just my comment. And my question is, what does enforcement actually look like, right? Does a guy turn up at the job site and start looking for labels? Does a guy turn up at the factory and say, I'm with the federal government, you let me in, and I'm going to start inspecting products in the line, and if products are not compliant, what happens?
No, those are all very good questions. And in terms of the compliance and enforcement, I mean, we don't have the resources or budget or taxpayer money to put somebody in every Home Depot parking lot across the country, but we do want to enforce this, and we have a mandate to. So what it would look like at at the minimum, contact the manufacturer and let them know they're non-compliant with the labeling regulations that we have, and we could remove them from the regulatory database at the most, which would be significant because their products would no longer be able to display the label. They'd no longer be eligible for certain programs that are in place that would require this. So there could be significant consequences when it comes to that. Again, through having a standardized label that will serve provinces, programs, municipalities, and everybody across the country, there's going to be more eyes on this. People are going to begin to expect what this format is. They're going to expect to see it on all products. And when they see one of them, they'll be able to look up the information through a model number, which will hopefully be harmonized and as much as we can with existing model numbers, so we don't have 3 or 4 different model numbers on the label, so that it'll lead you to our database, which will be updated on a regular basis with regular data dumps from the major organizations such as NFRC, to make sure that everything's in there. And if you don't find it in there, you can say, hey, what's going on? You can contact us, and then we can pass that to our compliance team. So when we're talking about other compliance products, I know I've mentioned other things, but we've been doing this for 25 years in terms of energy efficiency compliance. It's been the norm for furnaces and refrigerators and heat pumps and air conditioners and things like that. So we do have experience with this, but fenestration products are a unique case due to the number of different models and just the sheer size of what's going to be in the market and the database. So we're hoping to have a lot of collaboration with other groups across the country.
Hi, Jennifer from Fabelta. So if I understood the presentation, first of all, this is going to be for part 3 buildings only.
Part 9.
Part 9, sorry. So what we all know right now is multi-housing units are actually on the rise. Even I had people at my tables this morning, they were saying 90% of their business this year is the multi-housing industry. And I was wondering what was going to happen eventually with that market, because honestly, just as a company, since 2 years, we've lost not small contracts, $1 million contracts to Chinese windows that are coming half price, that are built in other conditions that we are not allowed to have here in Canada. So for me, I would really want an answer for those buildings because I think it's a big part of our business. So we need to address that.
Okay.
Also in Quebec, compared to the rest of Canada, we don't have inspectors. So, well, I don't know if you have a lot. So I'm like, it's nice to hear, but even as a basis right now, nobody knows like how to go around a house and verify what to look. So I think there's a long way to go. And I was wondering, like, what would be your strategy? Because right now, as someone in the market, like talking with professionals, I'm like, should I go public? Should I like write informations on what's going on here in our industry? And should we talk to like media? Because it's like we follow the rules. I think we're very good. Everybody's very conscious. I took the numbers down, so thank you very much. But some things are gonna have to move, and like Mr. Bruno said before, we can't wait 3 years. So part 3 and 4, what are we gonna do? And again, who's gonna come and help us? And the database, I hope it's a bit better than the actual database that we have right now, because customers finding their codes right now is not the easiest thing. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for the questions. And I'll I'll try and answer as many of them as I can. I mean, this is the first time, to be honest, I wasn't quite expecting people to ask us to include more products and do it faster, to bring a regulation in. I don't think that usually happens in our industry. But in terms of the commercial products, bringing them in, I mean, I can only speak to the scope of the regulation we're working at now. We've got a long cycle here of where things go, and we're starting with this because it's something that's easier for us to harmonize with. Again, we can only bring in regulations where they're technologically and economically feasible. So focusing on the residential buildings right now is something we're going to do. I know in provincial regulations, specifically in BC, they cover more of the more types of products, but this is not something that I can speak to in the future. If this becomes a policy decision and it becomes a priority for a future government in a future amendment, then absolutely we would look to put them in there if we find that that would benefit the industry and Canadian business.
Quick one, Phil Northcott, Sea Change Labs. Just want to let you know, technology has moved on a little bit since we started doing labeling however long ago. My honest recommendation is put on a QR code with a very specific label. Don't worry about anything else because everything else can go in the database. You can put the interface you want in the little app on the cell phone. Everybody's got one.
Thank you. That's something that's been brought to our attention before too. And if we can find a way to do it, we would love to have that. You know, we want to make this as user friendly as possible. Like again, I said, we want one label and we want the information to link to a database. And just to speak briefly to the database, because this touches on the other question about some of the complaints we're receiving about the current system, whether it's the Energy Star database or the regulatory database for products. I don't know if you've ever searched up any products there. We're undergoing an internal process of database modernization. So by the time that we're putting this through 2027, 2028, that should be completed. It will be completed and we'll be hopefully in a better place than we are now.
Thank you very much for coming. This is a rather hot topic in this room, as you can see. It's going to be a hot topic again tomorrow in our Manufacturers Council meeting because this is one of the biggest topics that we have to deal with right today, and it includes enforcement. We've been talking about how to get codes and how compliance and everything, but it really comes down to enforcement. So you're going to hear this a lot, and hopefully you're going to hear it a lot in the consultations to come, is who are going to be the boots on the ground to actually go there to a building and say, this is not compliant. Because everybody in this room is probably labeling right now. It's the 300 other manufacturers out there that are not labeling, that are not hearing this and this presentation, that has to hear this and say, you have to come along and be compliant. So who's actually going to be there on the ground to do it?
No, that's a very good point, and it's something that we look forward to elaborating on in the future. You know, again, bringing these products under the tent of federal energy efficiency regulated products is the largest step we can do in terms of compliance. It will exceed any of the abilities of the provinces or municipalities, and through having this uniform standardized label there that everybody's looking for these other manufacturers that aren't labeling that you're mentioning, people are going to see these in the marketplace and they're going to see, where's your label? Where's the QR code that I can scan to get this information to access the modernized database that's there? You know, if that's not there, it's not just our federal compliance enforcement teams going to be looking at it. Building inspectors, energy advisors, consumers, everybody is going to be expecting this. So we're going to have a lot more eyes on this, on these products, and a lot more eyes looking for this information. So I think that's going to benefit us to, in the future, just to make sure everybody playing by the same rules, and to support the manufacturers in this room who are playing by the rules and are doing a fantastic job already with energy efficiency products, and deserve to be rewarded and highlighted there for their efforts.
Good afternoon, and thank you as well. I'll echo what Steve said. Thank you for coming to this event. Um, for my own clarification, to the best of my knowledge, labeling is not a requirement for energy performance today in Canada. There could be some pockets where it is, but in general, it's not a requirement. This program would make labeling a requirement for all products in Canada. Is that correct? So it's now a mandatory feature.
It will, you are correct, but there is one key point to put in there is that the jurisdiction of the federal regulations extends to products that are imported into Canada or that cross provincial borders or territorial borders. So if you're a local regional manufacturer and you're only selling within your own province,
You're ruining my second question.
I'm free.
Sorry.
I've heard.
Sorry, I'm trying to look smart over here, for God's sakes. So the second question is, if you're making product in Ontario and selling it in Ontario, then you follow the provincial requirements, not the federal.
That is correct. Yes. If you're making in Ontario and you're shipping to Manitoba, then we need to have the energy efficiency report. But if you're in a province that already has a provincial regulation, then you will have that. One thing that we are hoping with the federal regulation is that more provinces will require the information from this. They will put it into their regulations. They will set their own performance standards. But in terms of labeling performance, they will say your product must have a federally regulated label.
Hey, Adam Jomo from Leighton Consulting. Thank you. As you can see, it's a room full of very passionate people here. So I appreciate you enduring this. I just have a question on a little bit on the importer from overseas, and it relates specifically a little bit to the BCBC code, provincial code as well. But one is if the manufacturer is applying the label, if I'm a, let's say, best European window manufacturer, but I sell to a whole range of dealers in Canada in different provinces, is the manufacturer the one, or is the final dealer the one applying the label? Because where is the guarantee that the product that's been fabricated doesn't have additional fabrication or also matches what it has? And then that, if it's just the manufacturer putting the label on, they can be at a greater advantage because they can, as long as they set up a dealer, they're fine. So
No, that's a very good point that you bring up about, and this is something that's covered in the terminology of the energy efficiency regulations. We use the term dealer as somebody or as an organization that has to submit the energy efficiency report. But the definition of dealer in the Act is very broad. It doesn't just mean a distributor, but it also includes a manufacturer. So in a way, by making this a broad definition, kind of puts everybody on the hook so that if you're distributing a product, you need to make sure that that product has submitted the energy efficiency report for it and has that in there. Same for a manufacturer, because a lot of, just to speak to other industries out there, something may come from overseas and it's brought into Canada and the factory, wherever it is, they don't apply any labels and they don't submit any energy efficiency reports. You're the dealer distributing that product in the Canadian market. You are responsible for making sure that that product's there. So you should contact the manufacturer and sort it out about who's going to report that information. We're hoping to get away from that kind of reporting where it's done model by a manufacturer or a distributor. We'd like to work more with the NFRC and the CBs themselves to receive this, just due to the sheer number of models that are there. But that's a very good point. Thank you.
definitely. And then just to tie it into in BC, to very simplify it, we have written into the code to follow the City of Vancouver Energy Modeling Guideline, which currently specifically outlines they do not want the NFRC or CSA standard label, the values based on the standards. And we do project specific. Half my staff, thermal staff, even though we are certified SimLab, is doing project specific, which leaves open for manufacturers of other overseas countries to bring a product with no labeling as long as they get a project specific value. So there is almost a headwind of conflict that exists in one province altogether. So
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're speaking about the practice in Vancouver of like having site specific values based on the size.
it's
of
not,
the-
it's
the
practice in BC because the modeling guideline is written into the building code.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're seeing more requests on provinces for site specific as energy modelers say, I want your values according to what's built, not what you've manufactured from your certified labels.
No, I understand that. Thank you. But I mean, that's a question that we will deal with. And it's something that when we're applying a federal regulation, it has to apply broadly to all provinces that are out there. And in a way, we're trying to find the minimum requirements that are there without asking too much of other provinces that may not require it. So to have the actual size specific and site specific values that are used by the modeler is, newish in terms of what's out there. And it would be, I feel like an undue burden for everybody to require that. But it's definitely something we'll take into account, and we will look to work with BC on this because we find their provincial regulations to be very progressive. And they cover a lot of models that are out there. And again, we would like to harmonize with the provinces where they have regulations and hopefully work with provinces to develop energy efficiency regulations where they don't necessarily exist.
So I've got two questions. So in this, you're saying part 9, 3 stories or less, whereas the federal government's going around the country trying to create more high density, multiple story houses. Was there any consideration, and who decides? Is it just the committee at NRCan that decides, or is it federally regulated that decides where to stop the limit? So that's one part. So because I don't know, they're giving up billions of dollars to go high rise density, yet this doesn't pertain to any of that. Unless I have a question. How about if it's a 9-story building that has punch out windows? Would then that in turn fall into this category?
I mean, where we're working with right now is we need to set a boundary somewhere. And you're bringing up really good points about this, about should we extend the scope of coverage to other types and other building types that are out there. Again, right now, what we've proposed that we've put through is focusing.
But it's contradictory. You have the federal, you're part of the federal government, right? So it's contradictory because the federal government's going out there and saying build high, and then an arm of the federal government is saying, but we don't care what you do in high buildings. We only care about 3 or less. But the whole mandate of the federal government that our great prime minister and is going around and starting to say we have to build high density. It's passion. This isn't frustration. It's frustration. It's passion. I'm not trying to belittle.
Mike, could I take a crack at that?
For sure.
Because that was my question.
Oh,
or
wow.
clarification.
What? For once, we're on the same.
When you and I agree, write the date down. Yeah. So, Adam, I think some clarification is important here. In your slide, you made it very clear, manufactured product. Okay. And then I think you used part 9 as an example of manufactured products. But any product you're labeling today, box going out of the plant with a label on it, I think it fits into his program. If you're labeling under NFRC for a box that's going out, a manufactured product with a label going off your shipping dock, I think his regulation will apply, regardless of where it
irrelevant
goes.
of the building type. Yeah.
Exactly. The regulation and the code are 2 separate things, I believe. Is that not?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that it's not clear. The regulation is manufactured products. I think your example was good of part 9 buildings, but it's not just part 9 buildings. If you're shipping a window into a 5-story multi-unit and you're putting a label on it, I think you still fall under his program. Well, I think we should tell him that.
Yeah. No, this is the kind of feedback I was really hoping to get about the scope of it.
And I
So
think to be
please.
clear, I think what you need to understand is if you're rating under any of the programs, CSA or NFRC today, and putting a label on it, I think it can fall into his program. Hang on, you got to ask this.
I mean, to speak to your point, Jeff, is that we've established a bit of a scope here. Again, this is the first draft of this regulation. If you feel that it's justified through the practices in the market that's there, that we should extend it, we should maybe change it. The definition that we settled on is pretty well known in the regulations that exist at the provincial level and in the Canadian Building Code for what we're talking about. Yeah.
Adam, in the slide, you showed that you wanted to have date of manufacture, right? You're going to have location of manufacture also. I don't know if it was there. I didn't see it.
No, you're right. The location of
And
manufacture was.
that's prime. Because if you don't have location of manufacture, Shenzhen or Saint Lambert, that is how you're going to be able to regulate and enforce. Because a product that's fabricated in Toronto, sold in Sarnia, that doesn't apply. A product that's fabricated in Saint Lambert, installed in Sarnia, it does apply. So location is the prime importance information in that label. Because if somebody with the boots goes on site and sees a label on a building that says fabricated in Toronto, installed in Toronto, your regulation doesn't apply. It's whatever other regulation that applies. But if somebody goes to a site in Quebec and sees location of fabrication Vancouver, then the regulation applies. So that's important for everybody to understand. This is a program that already exists. It's just a new line of product in that program. That's all it is. Because if you have light bulbs coming in Canada, they have to comply to that, right?
Yeah.
If you have a dryer for your clothes coming in Canada, before it leaves the shop, somebody must know that this product can be imported in Canada through the regulation. If somebody is fabricating a hair dryer, a clothes dryer in Montreal, there's a fabrication plant in Montreal, and they ship it to Vancouver, they're applying this regulation. So when we say we don't want to talk about other products, it's fine. But we're just a new line of product in a 25-year existing program. So keep that in mind, okay? And I do think, and I do agree with Jeff, that if you're going to regulate and control, and you're controlling at the time the product crosses a border, how the hell do you know where it's going? No way. You don't know if it's going in a Part 9 or a Part 5 building. You, the fabricator, may not even know where it's going, right? In a lot of cases, you fabricate a window, you put it in a box, it goes in a truck, and it's going to a site bought by a contractor that is building two-story house building on the same project. Across the street, there's a 7-story building, it's the same window. So that's important to keep in mind. And the enforcement is not somebody with boots. It's somebody behind a desk, behind a computer, looking at information provided when you actually ship a product that is applicable to the regulation. That's it, in my view. So, we can ask things to happen, like having 10,000 of people with boots and hard hats going on site verifying product. That's not the goal of this program. It's not. And it's not, obviously, they don't have the manpower to do that. They probably don't even have the cards to be allowed to go on the sites. Okay? So I don't know if that's the last comment, but.
Adam, I really appreciate all the abuse you've taken from us. Let me just start there. You've done great. So obviously enforcement's the big piece for us. I'm sure you're hearing that loud and clear. In my view, enforcement for our product is multi-layered. That we have enforcement of the black and white code enforcement portion, meaning we follow all the regulations exactly the way they're written. And I say that, and that should be the way it all works. Unfortunately, the complexities of our energy market with Windows is deep. And so there's a lot of ways that can be misunderstood. Then there's the really basic compliance portion, which is there was a label on the window at all. And so I'm going to use this kind of as a distinction on an ask. Would NRCan be interested in pursuing call it an enforcement roadmap for labeling compliance? So there is a active participation in kind of creating this enforcement opportunity. Because I don't think this is a one shoe fits all type of operation for enforcement. And arguably, there's probably a maturity of that enforcement that will have to happen over the course of probably longer than the program that you've given for 3 years. But like Mike said, there's some things that have to be done pretty quickly. And some of that might be low hanging fruit that we could tackle in a first implementation of an enforcement. But I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I mean, again, I'm hearing enforcement and more enforcement and sooner enforcement is what people are asking. So, I mean, I can only speak to the timeline that we have here and the enforcement apparatus that we have through the Energy Efficiency Act. Again, unless we want to raise everybody's taxes, we only have a certain budget to apply to this. And to speak to Robert's point, he's correct. This isn't so much boots on the ground. This is, emails to our office and, nasty calls that we give to manufacturers or people that we track down with these. So we're looking at an assistance with the enforcement. And we're looking to work with other programs, municipalities, and provinces out there who may be struggling with these same questions in terms of code compliance and in terms of which products are enforced and what's out there. So we're open to working with them, and we're open to being as transparent as we can about the process of what we have and what we're capable of doing. But to speak to the enforcement, I just want to mandate that when something becomes a federal regulation, it becomes a law, and if we are not willing to enforce that, then there's no point in putting it in. So the fact that we're putting it out there is something that we wish to highlight, that we do have a mandate to enforce compliance with these. It may be a challenge, but it's something that we're going to work on.
Adam, thank you for coming in. I'll give a little bit of a different perspective to everyone here. My name is Rosen Marinoff. I work for Masonite door manufacturer. And a decade ago, I actually worked for a third-party certification company. And I can tell you, I've dealt a lot with counterfeit products in the Middle East. Sharing some of the wisdom from my prior life is I've seen many times 2 products that look identical. I mean, visually, a window, a door, they look the same. And they had identical labels, right? What I can tell you, labels are extremely effective in standardization. So if you want to have the entire country on the same label, it's much easier for enforcers to read them. However, again, this is speaking from my prior experience. Counterfeiting a label, a sticker on a product is beyond easy. So my question to you is, do you feel label is the solution to dealing with, first, meeting energy requirements, and second, tackling counterfeiting that eventually will be coming?
No, that's a very good point, and I really appreciate your insight on that. I mean, again, the label is something that we're familiar with. It's already being done. And of course, it's a piece of paper. It's a sticker. Everybody has a printer. They can put whatever they want on the label. It's the people and the additional eyes that are going to be on that label to look it up. If we get tips from other manufacturers, distributors who say, I've never seen this product, something seems weird, maybe there's no French on this label, things like that would come up. We can get those tips, and the more people that are looking into this, and the more people are expecting a standardized thing, again, it's not going to be like, there's not going to be holograms on it or a counter, we're going to make it as applicable as we can. But we do intend to enforce it and to look at it. So these are challenges that would exist no matter what. We see these in every other industry too that's out there. It's just we need to get everybody on board and working together, and everybody watching it, just to highlight and to point out these bad actors that may be out there in the marketplace.
Is there any linkage of this to the desire to harmonize all the building codes across the country? That's my question. The context behind the question is I've spent 2 decades in British Columbia in my career seeing codes from 20 years, 25 years back to where we are today. And for those wondering about enforcement, the step code in British Columbia is now classified at step 3 as your minimum threshold for Part 9 buildings. So there's an energy advisor on every project who has got their eyes on a label, looking for a label on every project that has an energy compliance report. As the 2020 National Building Code has now introduced the tier code, not every province has adopted it. It's going to start to create a whole new function in compliance for energy efficiency for total home design, which then is going to have a professional who's done the energy audit of the building going around looking for labels on windows that are going into projects. So if you're wondering in other provinces, the sooner your province adopts the tier code, the sooner you're going to have an independent third party, not a building official, doing an inspection to make sure that the U value on that label matches the U value on their compliance report. And if I use BC as an example, we have the BC Energy Efficiency Act, which is regulated by the Ministry of Energy. And then we have the building code regulated by the Ministry of Housing. It's a joke. They don't talk. They're different. And nobody cares about the Energy Efficiency Act because there's no enforcement. Everybody cares about what's in the building code. So in fact, building officials are enforcing the code, not the act, because they're not in harmony. So my recommendation, my question and recommendation would be, if there's harmony with this, with the national building codes, you actually may have an enforcement arm that you can use as part of this program. So just curious to know if there's a linkage between the harmony of the codes and this program.
I just want to add that the building officials are supposed to enforce. He said they do.
Yes.
Just want to make sure we're clear on that.
I mean, thank you very much for the comment and the question. I mean, to be honest, I can't speak to what's happening with the National Building Code. That's not in my department that's here. But what we're trying to put forward is we're trying to put forward an information vehicle that will support everyone. So whether the National Building Code is adopted by all provinces, when they adopt it, which version they adopt it, this is part of the jurisdictional makeup of our country and part of the Constitution, that the provinces are able to modify and don't have to follow the federal codes or regulations as much as everything else. That being said, if we're working on something like this and we're looking at a label, again, standardized label that's required everywhere, people are going to be looking for this, and we feel like it can support codes. That's one of the things that we want out there, whatever those codes may be, whether they're the BC step code or whether it's NBC 2020 as ratified in Quebec and modified or whatever. All of it is going to require this information that we're asking. So we're not asking for any information that's out there that's special to one specific province that doesn't apply everywhere else. So I hope that answers your question, and it's something that we look forward to do as we harmonize our process as much as possible.
Adam, thanks again for doing this and showing our association the respect of this free consultation. This is really refreshing. And I guess I have two questions, obviously, along the lines of enforcement and what I'm seeing in the maturity of our association is that we do want to follow the rules and we want to see them be followed by others. And I really agree with Adrian there when he said it has to be a team approach. So two questions that I have. One is, will there be a reporting mechanism that we can report when we see situations of counterfeit or non-compliant product? And you touched a bit on the punitive measures, nasty phone calls, perhaps that, manufacturers will have their products removed from the database. Can you talk a bit more about the punitive measures for both domestic companies and international companies if it gets to the point that they continue not to comply?
In terms of the compliance enforcement tools that we have at our disposal,
Kill that, Mike.
okay.
Just show.
Hello, does it work? Hello?
Yep.
Okay,
Good.
thanks. Yeah, in terms of what's actually available out there, we do have a few different venues to go down there. I'm going to be frank with you. I'm not a compliance officer, and I don't deal with this on a day-to-day basis, but we work with them quite often. And as we're getting into fenestration products that are out there, I'm going to be working more and more closely with the compliance officers that are out there. What we have is there is a system of officers who work across the country, and they do receive information. A lot of the information that we get comes from emails or calls of people reporting things, saying something's not right. They find something on a building site, or they find something on a store shelf that doesn't meet the compliance requirements that are set out. And then we contact the manufacturers and we follow up on it. And, you know, I participated personally in several conversations with manufacturers where they have, and a lot of it stems from lack of information. A lot of people don't realize that their products are covered under the energy efficiency regulations. They don't know that they're classified as a dealer when they actually have to be reporting or requiring an energy efficiency report submitted to us. So these are things that we can get out in front of at the beginning. And, you know, I know I'm speaking to a room here full of people who are playing by the rules, who are representing the Canadian industry here. It's the people that I'm not speaking to that are the people that are going to be the problem, you know? So the most we can do is just work with what we do know, and try and touch base with as many people and work as a team with everybody out there. So if you see products that are non-compliant, or there's something strange going on, or double labeling, or it's, you know, counterfeit labeling, bring that to our attention. And we want to work with our provincial partners where they exist with the regulations to try and deal with these issues.
Back on my technology theme again. So with the counterfeiting problem, it's absolutely true. I can produce almost anything, including anybody's signature that you like, with a good inkjet. So that's not the right technique. The basic technique that you want to have is a global unique ID code. So you just look it up in the database. Does it match what's in front of you or not? And there are some really fairly simple ways of building a reporting scheme where you simply report the GPS, the QR code you got, and then take a picture of the thing. And you can really streamline complaints processes really strongly. I will say one of the really cool things that you can do if you build a good database-based labeling program that doesn't actually try to put information that's actually inked in is you don't have to know the answer on the day the label is applied. For example, if the building code is updated, you can update all the labels by simply updating the database. There's some really powerful technique you can use there. And if the technique that we put together is good enough and extensible enough, ideally, the provinces just sign on because it's already there. They don't have to pay for it. And once the provinces sign on, we don't have that huge loophole that if it's within province, it doesn't need a label.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Some more great ideas here. Perhaps you'd like to come work with us at the regulatory compliance team. I think we could really use your help.
It's my turn. The whole enforcement labeling conversation to me is pretty concerning, even with NFRC labeling, with CPD numbers, et cetera. I would challenge anybody that's not in our industry to look at a label on a window and its CPD number and go to the NFRC database and know that that's the same window. There's no way to know if you don't know the product series type, et cetera. So anyway, it's just something that I find challenging when I hear people talk about NFRC or CSA labels and then comparing that product to what's in the database. I've seen it on more than one occasion where the label is not what the window is. So anyway, just a point.
No, thanks, Terry. Those are really, those are really valid points, and this is fantastic feedback. So thank you all for your questions. In terms of what's out there, you're right. It's a challenge. We're dealing with a product, and for us on our compliance side and our enforcement side, it's going to be a new experience. We're going to have millions of products entering into our database. And that does that mean that we shouldn't do it? Just because it's difficult? It's something that I feel that our system and our team is up to the task, and it's going to be a learning experience as well. And we're going to lean on all of you in this room here too, to help us, to stop us from making the assumptions that may be wrong. And it's something that we're going to be working on in a long time frame. And we really want to work with all of you as a team to outline these issues and help us find the best program that's going to work for everybody.
Hi, over here. He's looking over there. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, I hope you're not picking up too much negativity on the labeling idea, because of course it is the step in the right direction as far as all the enforcement issues we're talking about essentially can't happen until there is some kind of a label, because the inspectors don't know what to look for. And we've had labels out there, right? All the NFRC, and everything else, and Energy Star and everything, and the difficulty always was faking, and also the building inspectors themselves didn't know how to read those labels and didn't know how to enforce what was there, right? So until you get to that stage of making it a mandatory performance requirement, you still really haven't solved the problem, because all you've got now is a label that says, well, we have the information is there, but so what, right? I don't know if it's compliant or not with whatever my provincial code is, right? So anyways, but you're going down the path, you're going down the direction is what I'm understanding here. My only comment or thing is, you do have to get border services involved. You do have to get that import part of it on it, because most of the people in this room wouldn't care about this so much if it wasn't for the foreign stuff coming in and taking projects from them that is non-compliant, and all of your penalties mean nothing to these people because they aren't even in the country, right? So take me off the database. So what? I wasn't labeling anyways. I wasn't relying on some database, right? And I'm going to ask Greg's question again, because I don't think we really got an answer. What are the penalties? What are the possible penalties that people face, aside from just being taken out of your database, for breaking this law?
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. What was the most recent thing? The most recent thing is, what are the exact penalties that are there? I mean, again, I can't speak to you about the exact penalties that are there. We have various things that are in there. There are some monetary penalties that are in there. There is provision for it, search and seizure of product. You talked about the border that's there, and there is an import report component of the energy efficiency regulations that must be submitted. So products that are coming in need to submit an import report, and we need to be able to verify that import report and cross-check it with the energy efficiency report for the product. So that's something that's there. Yeah, you know what? We do need to know what's there. And the requirement in the text of the act is that all of these reports need to be submitted prior to the product coming into Canada. So this has to be already in our database. And, for border services, we don't want to have to make them work harder than they already do. They need to be able to look it up and say, okay, something's here. It's fine. This model is in the database. That's fine. So if there's no label on it at all, that's a red flag if it's coming across the border. I mean, the only situation where that would be something that we would expect would be for a very regional market, somebody who is producing, or a manufacturer is producing just for their own region, that's not Ontario or BC, and they're not part of the Energy Star program, then in those small cases, they wouldn't have a label. But as this label and the standardized information becomes more and more prevalent, we would encourage regional producers, regional manufacturers who may not be subject to the federal regulations to still submit the data, because they may find that it'll benefit them in terms of competition. They're going to be competing against other products that are there that have these labels. Consumers and inspectors may begin to expect these. So there are benefits there in terms of marketing.
So when Adam and I first connected back 3 months ago, and we made an arrangement, an agreement that he would participate with us here today, this was not the topic initially. So I gave him an hour. Had I known that it was this topic, I would have given him 4 hours. So unfortunately, we're out of time. Incredible feedback. I think that we've delivered you, a lot of concerns and, suggestions about, what we can do to help. And I think hopefully you take that away from this session, that, you've got a friend in us. If you're going to bring a regulation in, we're all about trying to help you to do that. But we want to make sure that it doesn't harm our industry, right? So that's what we're all about in this session today, and our feedback to you. So Adam, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we'll definitely be staying in touch and working our way through this and providing our membership more info as this rolls out. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for your time, everyone.